All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Live Well Arizona Incubator webinar. Today, we'll get started in just one moment while everyone is joining, and we are thrilled that you could be here today. We are recording this webinar, and you will not appear on screen, but we are happy to take your questions. We definitely want you to participate. So please, if you have questions throughout the webinar, go ahead and type them into the chat because we are here to answer your questions. And like I said, we'll get started in just one moment. All right, thank you for everyone for joining today. We already had one question pop into the chat, so thank you to Sevi for going ahead and testing that out for us. The question was, what is the estimated length for today? This webinar will take no longer than an hour, depending on how many questions we get, but we are going to be here until 3 o'clock today, about to answer any questions you might have and go over the Live Well Arizona Incubator application process and what it's like to actually be a participant in the incubator. I will go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, John Ford, to get things started.
Now that I know that we're on the clock, I'm going to keep this short. Welcome, everybody. It is so exciting to see so many people at this webinar. As Serena said, we are recording this as well. So if, as we go through this webinar, you're thinking of others who should be aware of what the incubator is and does, please share that link once we get it posted. But thank you so much for being here in person today. We're in a hurry to get to your questions. So let me just say this. Vitalist and the partnership together have been so grateful to the communities that we've worked with so far in this Live Well Arizona Incubator, and we are really excited about meeting new communities in this cohort. Every single time we've done this, we've done 2 cohorts so far, and every time it has been a tremendous experience for all involved, not the least of which the partnership and Vitalist. So we're excited to get to know you. We're excited to answer your questions, and we're looking forward to a great incubator cohort this year. Just real quickly, I'm going to say, in case you haven't read it already, the real gist of the incubator is to get place-based work to happen across sectors, to get groups of people who share the same desires but come from different backgrounds, that come from different parts of the community or different professions, to work together on pretty big problems. And if 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we've got pretty big problems to face. So without further ado, let's go to it. Serena, you want to give us an overview of the incubator, and then we're going to talk some with a coach and some with a former team member, correct?
Yep, exactly. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Serena Unrein with the Arizona Partnership for Healthy Communities. John Ford is with Vitalist Health Foundation. And together, the Partnership for Healthy Communities and Vitalist launched the Live Well Arizona Incubator 3 years ago. So this will be our 3rd cohort, and we're really excited because we think that we've figured a few things out, and we, like John said, have learned so much from communities and participants from across the state. And we're excited to get to know you and support the work that you're doing in your communities. What we've learned from doing work in communities is that health does not just take place in a doctor's office. In fact, so much of what creates health, it depends on where we live, where we work, and where we play. So we know that there are so many factors that go into health, from housing to transportation to our educational system to access to healthy food, and so many more elements that make up a healthy community. And a lot of times this work is best when it's done in partnership across sectors, but that work is often really challenging. It's hard to know where to begin. It's hard to know who else to bring to the table. So the idea, the concept behind the incubator is that we want to support teams who are based in communities, based in neighborhoods, who are interested in improving their community in some way. And their project does not have to have the word health in the title, because a lot of what happens, like I said, is not necessarily about medical care or healthcare. We have a really broad view of what actually creates the conditions for people to be well and thrive. So we launched the Live Well Arizona Incubator to support that kind of early stage work that is really challenging to get off the ground, to help teams as they start this process of collaboration and working across sectors. So for this third cohort, we are continuing to pair teams with a coach. So we think that that is really the secret sauce to what makes the incubator great, is that each of the teams in the Live Well Arizona Incubator is paired with a coach, and we do our best to match coaches and teams that are really well suited for each other. And this coach, you'll hear later from Cynthia Meldy, who's been a coach in our last two cohorts, about what her role is and what you can expect a coach to do. This coach guides the team as they work through this 10-month process of collaborating. And then they help together to develop an action plan to really take this work to the next level. And that's unique to each team and their community. So for this third year, we're making a few adjustments in current conditions. We've in the past held 3 in-person workshops during the 10-month incubator process. And of course, things are a little bit different in 2020. So when we kick off the Live Well Arizona Incubator in January of 2021, we'll be doing those same workshops, but this time they'll be held virtually. They'll look a little bit different. And the particular information that will happen and opportunities to learn in each of the incubator workshop sessions will be tailored to the teams that join this incubator cohort. So in the past, that's included things like community engagement, applying for funding, storytelling. So I would love to say exactly what is going to be happening in each of these workshops, but the truth is we don't know yet, because we don't know who's going to be joining this cohort of the incubator. So with that being said, I think it's best if you hear from someone who's actually participated in the Live Well Arizona Incubator about his experience and what his team did. So we'll be hearing from Zach Yenser from Tucson, who is with the Menlo Park Neighborhood Association. And then right after Zach, you'll also be hearing from Cynthia Meldy, who's coached 2 teams in each of the first 2 incubator cohorts. And then while they're talking, if you want to go ahead and pop questions into the chat, I will be monitoring those questions. So if I interrupt them, it's not to be rude, but because we want to be able to have a conversation with you and the coach and incubator participant as we go along. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Zach to share with you his experience, and I will be sharing a couple of photos as well on screen that Zach was kind enough to provide.
Super. Thank you, Serena, for the opportunity. And John, thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of this initiative, and would encourage all of the 97 participants to definitely apply. And it's really cool to be speaking to 97 people across the state who see value in this, and you should. So I'll share a few quick thoughts and keep it as short as possible, because I'd love to answer any specific questions that come up. But as Serena said, my name is Zach Yenser. I'm the president of a neighborhood association in Tucson called Menlo Park. And a real quick background on the neighborhood, because it's the whole reason why we applied in the first place. We are at the base of our version of a mountain, for any Phoenicians on the call. The claim to fame for our A mountain is at the base of it is 4,000 years of farmed history. It's the oldest really community in North America in terms of a neighborhood, of a population where they've been able to say, hey, we can track back 4,000 years to people who lived here, worked here, raised a family here. And one of the things that our neighborhood found that was interesting a few years ago is that we are one of a few places in the entire city that doesn't have what's called a neighborhood plan. And a neighborhood plan is basically a land use strategy that mayor and council uses, that developers use, that city staff use to basically decide what happens in this neighborhood. It's kind of a guiding document. And so a few years ago, we said, why do we have 4,000 years of history and yet no modern way to really, as a community, design our place for social and cultural cohesion? And so I was sent this wheel, this elements of a healthy community. And I think a majority of these would fit into what we're trying to do with our neighborhood plan, this neighbor-driven effort to shape the future of our community. We said, boy, community design and social and cultural cohesion are elements of a healthy community we're really striving for with this project. And back to Serena's point, one of the things that we have to do in our community is engage across sectors. So we kind of had this two-layer challenge. One is we had to, as passionate neighbors, bring county, city, private sector, development interests, an organization called Rio Nuevo, which is a TIF district even. It's all in this area. We have 2,000 homes and rooftops, striving to create this neighborhood plan, and have to work with all these individuals. So that's number one. Number two was that we, as naive neighbors, I'll just be honest, have to come up with a very strong land use policy, way out of our league. We get to work with the city on it, but we needed help. And so when this opportunity came across our desk, this was something that I knew we had to apply for and give it a shot. Not only in year two, at least, did it come with a little bit of funding, but what we were really excited about was the coach. So that's the project. And I just wanted to go into detail to back up Serena's point that it doesn't have to have health in the name. It's a very broad definition of health, and that worked in our favor because we have a very broad definition of health here. So I would say a couple of things I think are valuable to community groups. The one thing that I thought about as I was preparing this is the coach process. And for us, it was really cool to not only have a variety of coaches to look at, and I don't want to say choose from, because it was very much a mutual process with this partnership. But we were able to see, hey, once we submit our application, we were accepted into the program. As a team, we were sent a few coaches that seemed to kind of fit the bill. And we got to respond back and say, hey, we think this person or that person is maybe a great fit as a coach. Our sense is that this person will be able to help us in the best way. On top of that, we were also able to do phone interviews with the coaches, which I think is really cool as a team. We were able to get on the phone with a couple of the coaches that were a part of the group selected for us to look at, and get on the phone with them before we even got started and sense best fit and relationship and get a feel for it. And then we were able to email Serena and John and say, hey, we think that these are, this is the best fit for us. And so I thought that that was really cool. The other thing, and I asked if this was okay, because I asked John and Serena specifically if this would be okay to share, but at least in terms of a community organizing standpoint, we feel most days that we are the only people in our ecosystem working for free. When you're working with the city, those planners are paid. When you're working with the county, those folks are paid. When you're working with developers, they're in the process of getting paid. When you're working with other interests, they are in a different position. When it comes to neighbors and community organizers, for lack of better terms, we're kind of the only folks that often don't have that financial support. And so one of the things that I think is really cool about this program is that the coach is not, working on their own love and blood and sweat and tears. They are, but they are supported as well financially through this by this partnership. And so it really, as you can see in this picture, our coach came down from Phoenix multiple times, sat down with us, hung out with us for hours, and we always felt supported. We always felt like we had expertise on our side. We always felt like we had kind of some insider knowledge that could help us navigate a very complex situation. And we never felt rushed. We never felt kicked off the phone. We never felt like we were a bother. We were able to get in a room like this and really make some decisions and sort some things out. And our coach really came in and said, hey, here's a list of things I don't think you've thought about. Do you mind if we pull back a little bit and pull back some of the layers on this initiative? I have some insight you don't have, which is what every good coach should do, I think, and provided some insight that we didn't have. And you can see what's happening around that room, and was really able to kind of put on a lot of different hats. You know, one was a neighbor hat, and then a planner hat, and then a city hat. And our coach had all that expertise and experience. And so um, those were a few of the highlights that I wanted to share. I guess just to review, I was very impressed with the sector expertise. I think a lot of programs will see the word coach and think of just someone that can broadly assist on some broad topics of community engagement. Our coach was in every way an expert on the exact challenge we were trying to figure out. And props to, you know, to the organizing team for finding the coaches that they do that are sector expertise driven. That was such a benefit to us. The teams get an opportunity to speak into that selection process. The assistance is these coaches are there because they have a heart, but they're also supported by Vitalist in this partnership. So that's huge. I would just say that if you have an initiative that is a broad definition of health, you need some help to kind of get over the edge. I'd also say, in our experience, our coach helped us to bridge a diversity of opinions. I think our group, we're all in it for the right reasons, but we come from a diversity of backgrounds and opinions, and sometimes you need a third party to help sort some of that stuff out. And to see some things that you can't see, or to help in ways that you don't know you need help in. And so all those areas were covered for sure. And so I would just encourage everyone to give this a shot. I think it's applicable to a wide variety of things. And again, I just want to, in closing, say thank you so much, and I hope that was helpful.
Definitely helpful, Zach. And thanks for sharing your experience and what it was like to participate in the incubator. Before we move on to Cynthia, would you just share a little bit about how the incubator helped you to include voices from those who have lived experience in the community in a way that you might not have if you hadn't been part of the incubator?
For sure. Yeah, and one thing that I didn't speak to, because I've been so excited to share about the coach and team relationship, is in the seminar experience. Again, Serena, you mentioned it's going to be a little bit more tailored to maybe the specific groups, but one of the workshops here in year 2 was, how do you do that? How do you bring in voices that might not be heard? And one of the things that our coach really helped us to think through was the process to do that, not just the tactics, but the process. And when I said that she asked us to step back, the reason why she asked us to step back and take a little bit more time was because she realized that we could have all the technical nuts and bolts and tactics to our strategy. If we didn't have the people power to back up what we felt was true, if we didn't bring a diversity of people into this planning process. Neighborhood plans require inclusive democratic process. It involves a lot of people all at once speaking to what they want for housing, transportation, development, so on and so forth. Then we weren't going to have the project that we wanted at the end. I'll just wrap up by saying that on this planning project, there was also some pushback from our neighborhood on some of the institutional power voices that needed to be at the table. I think when we think about diversity and inclusion, we think about it on an individual level. But in our case, we had to also think about it on the institutional level. And so how do we as neighbors, not knowing what we don't know, how do we step in intelligently and bring in some of the more institutional power to the table and figure out how to do that and get buy-in for doing that, understand why we had to do that, and bring them to the table so that when we get done, that this is a broad-based, cross-sector planning initiative that could actually get done. Our coach had to help us figure out how to reach out in both directions. And I don't know if we would have had the support needed to do that without our coach. So.
Thanks, Zach. I really appreciate you sharing your experience, and we were so glad to have Menlo Park Neighborhood Association as part of the last Incubator cohort. And with that, I will move along and have Cynthia Meldy, who was a coach, but not for the Menlo Park Neighborhood Association in the last 2 cohorts. So you'll be hearing a little bit different of an experience from Cynthia, both because she's been a coach and then she has been working alongside 2 different projects over the last 2 years. So Cynthia, I'll let you go ahead and get started and let me know when I should start your slides.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, John and Serena. Great to be in good company with Zach again. And good afternoon to everybody who's joining. Serena, you can go ahead and start the slides. The visuals will hopefully provide a little bit of comic relief in times where I'm finding humor is needed more than ever. As I kind of talk a little bit about what is a coach in the Incubator project, and give a little bit more context to what Zach already beautifully described. So I won't have to cover as much because Zach already did a great job. So I was asked to kind of say, what is a coach? And there's not a one size fits all answer, which I think is actually the gift and the beauty of the Incubator project. While the outcome of this project is to build a group of people that are going to work on this sticky problem and work towards solutions and have an action plan. The way that we get there is really flexible, adaptable, and really depends on what the team needs, as well as what the coach's skills are that are brought in. So it's not a formula, you know, and it's not a one size fits all. And that's also the beautiful part, is there's so many different skill sets on the coaching team that Vitalist and the partnership bring together that you can select from. So we'll talk a little bit about how do you pick your best coach as you go through this process as well. I think if you see the puzzle slide, I like this because oftentimes we think things need to kind of line up exactly in this linear way. And that gap in between those mixed piles of pieces in the put together puzzle is really where the coach comes in. It's helping you kind of think about how do you close that gap a little bit more? And how do you pull in some more pieces of that puzzle? It might be different sectors that you need to pull in. It might be lived experiences. It might be the institutional powers that, you know, haven't been to the table and need to be educated on why this is important to the community and those kinds of things. So I think that that graphic is really helpful when I think about what is a coach. It's not a person that's going to come in and facilitate your meetings. It's not a person that's going to own the work or do the work between meetings. That's for all of you to do. It's really a co-learner with you, a strategic thinker, and someone who's going to ask you those questions to help you get to the most sustainable solutions possible for the problem that you're addressing. I will say that with the breadth of experience that all the coaches come in with, we all continue to learn through each Incubator project because there's such variety that comes in every time. That's also why I love being a coach in the Incubator, is I want to learn along the way too. And so it's really a co-learning experience that happens, and every team has a little bit of a different need that each coach adapts to through the process. The other thing I just want to add before we go to the next slide is, you know, one of the groups that I worked with last year, we ended up, there was a few things that had happened around that team and personal lives and those kinds of things, which caused a lot of strain on how to make those relationships and that kind of team of people working together. And it really became, instead of building this action plan, about a leadership plan. Because as one person has to adjust based on personal reasons, another person has to come forward. And so it was really about how do we have adaptive leadership when things and challenges. COVID is a perfect example. All of us have different struggles that we're dealing with in our home right now. Some have to step up a little bit more than others right now in this time. It's a perfect example of how, you know, you build that team so that you have some supportive leadership around the table that will make it sustainable. So we can go to the next slide, which is a little bit more about, you know, how do you choose a coach? And I hope you all appreciate The Office as much as I do. And maybe I'm dating myself for those that are younger. I've had conversations where people are like, what is The Office? And I'm like, oh my gosh. If you haven't watched it, tune in for a good laugh. This is not the way to pick a coach. I think Zach definitely highlighted a great way of, it's about the relationship and the expertise that you need. So I think going into writing your application for the incubator, really think about the skill set that you're needing. What's the missing gap? Again, that visual between the puzzle pieces. What is it that would help you close that gap? That's what you're looking for in a coach. Like Zach said, you get to interview. The partnership will give you some recommendations about skill sets that they think match based on your application. And then you get an opportunity to interview and have conversations. I went through multiple different conversations with often the same team. We did a couple of calls. It really matters to have a relationship with one another. And while it's hard to do these kind of phone or virtual get to know each other, I think oftentimes your gut will tell you when you click with somebody. And if they have that expertise to offer, I think that's a really good fit for coaching. So really think about the skill set that you're looking for and how to close the gap. And then really trust your gut on the discussion and conversation, and ask some informal questions. Get to know that person, get to know their life experience in a little bit, and just know where they come from, because I think that also is really important to how the relationship forms over the year working together. You can go to the next slide, Serena. So how do you best utilize your coach when you are, and I think Zach gave a really great example of how their coach really helped them know when to kind of slow down and when to kind of push forward and where to, kind of go. It's really important, and especially as you are thinking about applying for the incubator, that you're willing to get out of your comfort zone. That's where growth and change happen. And, in my experience in the 2 years working and going through also the workshops with the teams, there are times where we get very uncomfortable with each other in the room, with the topics we're discussing, because we're really trying to dig into these sticky, really hard, difficult to solve problems across multiple disciplines, and we all come from different perspectives. It's also the awesome opportunity to kind of hear different perspectives and start and listen and try to come to agreement, or some type of collaborative decision around how to move forward. So I would say, one, you want a coach that is going to help push you into the what's on this graphic, the learning zone, or out of your comfort zone. But we're also not going to push you into panic zone. And so if you are feeling like you're in a panic zone situation for whatever reason, I talked about a previous team where there was a personal issue that put that person into panic zone. We needed to kind of take a step back a little bit and rethink our strategy, because nobody's very productive in that panic zone. And so a coach is going to push you into that learning zone with the feedback from the team. And I think it's really important as a team to be willing to try new things, willing to try to learn new ideas, new concepts. We use these words in public health, equity and resilience, and all those, terms that are kind of jargony at this point. We really dig into that oftentimes in the incubator workshops and with the teams, and we really have deep discussions about what does that actually look in practice, not theory, but what's it look like in practice? How do we do this in practice? And so it's really important to be willing to try new things, to learn new things, to be wanting to build relationships with people from different perspectives. And then the next slide. So I was asked to kind of share a little bit about what advice do I have for teams. And John often shares this. I'm stealing John's thunder from David Foster Wallace about, I'm sure many of you have heard that saying is there's, two fish swimming and another fish comes up and says, how's the water? And the two fish say, what's water, to each other, and never see the water. And so I think the advice to me is get ready to see the water and get ready to jump out of that water. We are all soaked in a certain amount of water, our system, our policies around us, our community around us, that really shape the way that we see the world. And the incubator is meant to help us maybe unlearn some of the things that water wasn't helpful for, and learn some new things that, add something else into your water, but really be ready to kind of see the system, see the policy that will allow that more productive, sustainable solutions to come forward. But it doesn't come without a little discomfort. So we don't know where that fish is headed. And sometimes at the end of this incubator project, you have this action plan, but you haven't gotten to that implementation of it. And you're like, oh my goodness, where do we actually end up? And I will tell you that the two projects that I've worked with, I'm still working with outside of the incubator project. We've built very strong relationships with one another. Some of it's just friendship and just, on Facebook, and we chat and I cheer them along as I see different milestones being met. And some of it's more of a formal relationship, and I'm still helping guide some of the process as they've received some additional grant funds. And so you may not know exactly where you're totally headed at the end of it, but I will tell you that it's very much worth the process of getting out of the water, because where you're headed is much better than where you started. So I think that's all I was asked to talk about. Is there any questions or any other things I should mention, Serena?
Cynthia, could you just tell us what the two teams were that you coached? Because I think it'll give people an idea of just the breadth of teams that join the incubator, because all of these projects are really different. So if you could just describe them and their work really fast, that would be helpful too.
Absolutely. The first round of the incubator, I got the honor to work with South Mountain Works Coalition. They are working on trauma-informed care, or what they call Community Health and Resilience Project. Which starts in the school systems. They are working with staff, teachers, youth across Phoenix Union and Roosevelt School District right now, and expanding their work into the community, healthcare providers, and making sure everybody understands a little bit more of the lens of not what's wrong with you, but what happened and how can we help. And so that's the work that that team is doing, and it's led by Shamari Jackson and Sang-Hoon Yu. So if you ever get a chance to be in their company, you'll feel just amazing to be around them. The second group that I got to work with was down in Tucson, and I absolutely drove down to Tucson and spent much time. I love Tucson. So it was Cohort Press, and they are working on a gender diversity initiative, really focused on LGBTQ youth in the school system as well, and really creating safe and productive learning environments for youth that are often left behind, from the design of bathrooms to the policies that the schools have in place, to even the community. And so it was really working on how to create a much safer and healthier space for these youth that have pretty poor health outcomes. And we know education makes a big difference in our health outcomes. So those were two of the groups. And definitely my background comes from actually being in public health, and working across multiple sectors, working in policy systems change from the state government to community-based work. Not a content expert in trauma-informed care, not a content expert in gender diversity work, but definitely could help with the building of the team, thinking about the right partners to bring around the team, thinking about the evolution of the project and how it moves forward. So does that help give some context, Serena?
It absolutely did. So thanks for sharing that, because I think not only is their work really inspiring and exciting, but it's also just nice to hear what kind of teams you might be working alongside with if you join the Live Well Arizona Incubator. And I also want to mention that we happen to have highlighted a few examples that came from Tucson and Phoenix, but a lot of our teams are actually from more rural areas of Arizona. We have, I think both of our cohorts had more teams join from rural communities than from urban ones. So if you heard those examples and thought, I don't know if this is for me because they happen to live in a more rural part of Arizona, this is absolutely for you. And I just wanted to make sure to mention that, because I think one of the best parts of the incubator is just the geographical diversity of teams that have joined the first two cohorts. And we certainly hope to replicate that in the third cohort. So if you are from a rural community or a tribal community, please apply. We would love to have you join the next cohort of the Live Well Arizona Incubator. So I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what we're looking for in the application, and we've had a few questions come up in the chat. So I will address some of those technical questions about what the Live Well Arizona Incubator is and is not as well. And then if you have more questions as we're going through, this is the time to ask them, because we want to make sure that we are addressing all of your questions about the incubator. And if you haven't noticed already, a lot of the time our answer is, it depends. And we've intentionally designed the incubator to be flexible, because we know that one size fits all is not what works for Arizona's communities. And we know that each community has unique needs and that you'll have unique coaching needs and unique technical assistance needs. So if you are tired of us hearing it depends, then you might not want to apply for the incubator because you'll hear it a lot more. I'm joking, please apply. So to answer one of the questions that came up, we were asked how many teams are going to be joining the next cohort of the incubator, and spoiler, it depends. So we have had 5 teams in both of the first 2 cohorts. We anticipate having at least 5 teams in this next cohort, and we have space for anywhere up to 8 teams. But honestly, it just depends on the applications and what kind of teams are applying for the incubator, and if we think this is helpful for you and the work that you're doing, and if it's a fit for the early stage work that we're trying to support. So we don't know yet, but we are hoping for at least 5 teams to join this cohort. Another thing that often comes up is people will often refer to this as a grant. And I want to be super clear that the teams that are accepted into the incubator get to participate in the incubator for free. They get a small $1,200 stipend to help them put on community meetings, perhaps buy a Zoom membership, since we're doing all sorts of virtual community engagement these days. Prepare brochures, pay for a facilitator for a special meeting. Those kinds of things are all things that teams have used their incubator stipend for in the past. But that is really the financial portion of being accepted to the Live Well Arizona Incubator. And of course, the big part of the incubator is having that coach that walks alongside you during the incubator process. So while it might be easier to just refer to it as or assume that it's a grant program, in shorthand, I just wanted to make sure that that is really clear about what the incubator is. We also had a question come up about what kind of teams this incubator program is designed for, and whether it's designed for a newly formed team or if it's a fit for a group of people that have been working together to build capacity to move that coalition or group to a deeper level of collaboration and impact. And generally, we lean toward early stage collaborations and that's hence the name incubator in the title, that we really want to allow time for these ideas to incubate and form and really come together. But I think that it depends, again, it depends, on you and on what you're looking for, and if this might be a little bit newer bit of work. But if you have an idea that is a little bit further along in the process and you think you could use some technical assistance, I'd still encourage you to reach out either by applying for the incubator or contacting the Partnership for Healthy Communities directly, because we still really want to hear about work that's happening in communities, and we will do our best to support that work through technical assistance or trying to connect you to the right people. So even if the incubator isn't the right fit, or even if you apply for the incubator and it doesn't work out, we are completely sincere, both at the partnership and Vitalist, in our desire to help support and uplift this important work that's happening in communities across Arizona. So if you decide to apply, that's great. If you are further along in your work and you decide that the incubator isn't quite the right fit for you, I still hope that you will reach out. And at the end of this webinar, I'll be sure that we send out not just a link to this recording, but also a link to contacting the partnership as well. So I'll make sure that all of that information gets passed along.
Serena, I just wanted to add a little. I think I have a good example of how there's been a long-standing coalition. So South Mountain Works Coalition has been together for a long period of time, but they were taking on a new initiative with this trauma-informed work that meant that they need to engage a different sector that hasn't been around, meaning more the school system and some of the community members. So they needed help building that team which is underneath the longstanding coalition. So I think that's a good example of there's maybe an existing partnership that's already been there, but there's some new work that's forming within this partnership that needs new sectors to the table. And that might be a good incubator project to work on, versus Cohort Press was an emerging group that was building relationship with one another while they were figuring out how to address their gender diversity needs in the community. And so that was very much of an emerging example. Does that help give context maybe?
It absolutely does. Thank you.
Here's another way to think about it. And this was one of the primary starting points for the incubator, was this notion of, if you are working in your community and it turns out that way more work is needed than what your day job can accommodate, you're probably in the right place. This is the opportunity for, we know that this work that we're talking about is no one person's day job. And I'll just give you an example. In the last cohort, we had the Cottonwood Oak Creek School District. And what we heard from them as applicants was, just to get our kids in a position to show up ready to learn, we have to be thinking about food. We have to be thinking about social issues. We have to be thinking about transportation. We have to be and so they were thinking about everything but their day job before they even got to the teaching part. And so it made it a really prime opportunity for Cottonwood Oak Creek to be part of this incubator and build that broader team. Hopefully that example helps. And a nod to our far-flung projects. I even have this bracelet here, thanks to the incubator. That's from one of our Navajo partners.
I love it. And I think the example you just shared, John, goes to answer a question that came in from Mary Perez, talking about if there's an area of passion, but the people who are passionate about this particular area aren't affiliated with a neighborhood organization, will we partner them with a group working on a similar project? And I think the answer to that is that the coach would work with those people to think about who else is in the community and help come up with the plans for actually reaching out to those right neighborhood groups to help support that work. So we wouldn't necessarily do the partnering and say, okay, we're going to pair you up. But if teams are accepted to the incubator, the coach is really going to help, along with the workshops, help these teams think about who else needs to be at the table and who else is missing to really make this project successful. And then it's really going to be the teams that will need to go back out to the community and reach out, because we probably don't live in your communities. So it's really important that these communities are driving the solutions and implementing them, because we want these to be things that are really led by the community. So I know we'll get to some of the other questions that are coming up in the chat, but since that was related, I wanted to make sure to address it right then. A few questions that we wanted to make sure to highlight in the Live Well Arizona Incubator application. So we're really looking for project-based work here. We're looking for strategic approaches and not just programs. So we're really looking to figure out, how can your work change the underlying conditions where people live? How can we do these long-term systemic changes to help people live well and thrive? So programs are really nice and important, but we're looking for that more strategic approach. Another thing that I think is really important to mention is that we are looking for teams that are thinking about a cross-sector approach. So we want you to include other people. We want you to be reaching out across from your sectors. We are looking for early stage projects. So we don't expect you to have everyone at the table. We don't expect you to have it all figured out, but we do hope that when you apply, that you'll be thoughtful about who else needs to be included in this work, even if you don't have it all figured out just yet. So even if we see in the application that you're starting to think about, okay, there are these other sectors that need to be involved, and we haven't quite figured that out yet, it's just helpful to us to see that you're already thinking about who else needs to be included. And of course, that's also true for including people with lived experience, including the people who are most impacted by the work that you're trying to do in your incubator work. So even if you haven't figured out your community engagement strategy yet, that is totally okay. But we want you to at least acknowledge what you're thinking about and where you think you might need the most help in your time in the Live Well Arizona Incubator. So please be thinking about other sectors. Please be thinking about people with lived experience as you are applying, and include those reflections and thoughts in your application. I mentioned the stipend, and applications are due by Friday, October 16th by 5 p.m. And everyone will know by November, mid-November, we will let you know. And then we will work on pairing teams and coaches in late November and December. And the Live Well Arizona Incubator will start in January of 2020 and conclude in October 2020, or excuse me, January 2021. We do not need to relive this year. We will start in January 2021 and we will conclude in October of 2021. So that's kind of the timeline. So you still have plenty of time to apply. The application is short. We don't expect paragraphs and paragraphs. So we encourage you to be thoughtful and include as much detail as you think is helpful. And if you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And John will talk about one of the opportunities to reach out to us in a moment here. But I know we've had a few questions come in. John, do you want to ask, and I'll repeat those dates while I let John start to handle some of these questions, since we had a question about what the dates are again. Applications are due Friday, October 16th by 5 p.m. We will let everyone who has applied for the incubator know by the middle of November if you'll be joining the next cohort of the incubator. We will work on pairing teams and coaches from mid-November through mid-December, and everything will kick off by early January of 2021.
Perfect. A couple of questions that I don't think we've addressed. And by the way, I'm not even sure, can the people who are on the webinar see what we see in this chat box? They cannot? Okay.
No, for the most part, no.
All right. One of the questions that came in that I don't think we've addressed directly, what is the size of a team generally? Remember what Serena said about it depends? That applies again. We've had teams as small as, I would say literally 2 people that actually ended up growing to about 12 people during the course of the incubator, but the original applicants were just 2 people. We've had very large groups like the South Mountain Works Coalition, which they had to decide sort of who was going to sit at the table with the coach, right, Cynthia? Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so size does not matter. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, a question about whether or not Zach's group was able to compensate local neighborhood folks who were organizers. So Zach, do you want to, well, you kind of gave that to me, didn't you? So let me tell you, what we do, the reason we have the stipend is so that teams can use that as they see fit. We pretty much don't question what you do with that stipend. Yes, we do need some sort of documentation and all that kind of stuff because there are accounting people that have to track these things. And so technically we approve your stipend. But if you want to use that $1,200 for travel, you could do that. If you want to use it to buy popsicles, you could do that. Or if you want to use it to compensate organizers, you could absolutely do that. So I think that was one of the questions that we had not quite gotten to yet. I think a bunch of the other questions that have been asked, we have addressed, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody else on the team want to double check me on that? But I think we're good. So while we're looking through the questions, let me just say a few more things if I could. I think it's really important that folks who apply to this understand that this is a fairly organic process. And at the risk of sounding like the self-help section at the bookstore, it really is about having a growth mindset. It really is about being gritty. It really is about being a learner all the time. I woke up this morning and thought about a presentation that I was asked to give to the entire group in the first cohort. and how embarrassed I am about what I know now versus what I knew then. Like, I would take that presentation back if I could, and I would redo it based on what I've learned since that moment with you guys in the incubator. We are all learning in this process. So if you're excited to learn, we're excited to have you there. It's really, really important that we all have a good, strong sense of being able to grow together, to work together, and to a couple of points made earlier, the skills match with the coach is really crucial. We have been so fortunate, and we have a great group of coaches that are waiting in the wings for you. It is not us assigning you the coach, it is you selecting the coach, and we will work with you carefully on that because we know how important that relationship is. But you know, I think again, that ability to learn and grow, that ability to be adaptive through the work, all of that is really, really, truly important. And I can't emphasize enough that the times where there have been issues have been related to the fact that folks think the coach is going to do the work for them. And it's not, that is not the way it's going to be. It can't be, because what we're trying to create with you is a team in your locality that can be autonomous. And so there's no reason whatsoever why we would have you be dependent on a coach from January through the fall and then expect you to be autonomous. We want you to practice being autonomous throughout the process. Guys, have I missed anything else in the chat box? I don't think we have.
There was one other question that came in about how many teams will accept in this cohort of the incubator, and we will accept at least 5 teams. So I just, in case anyone else missed that, I wanted to make sure that we address that.
So this recording will be living on the webpage at the partnership related to the incubator, and this is not the end of your chance to ask us questions. We have a Q&A Zoom call that is scheduled for October 1st. We will absolutely get that information out to you about when that's happening, and we'll be happy to have a much more open, completely Q&A focused session with you at that point. Oh, right, so Suzanne, let me call you Serena, how about that? Serena just mentioned in the chat box that when we did the first cohort of the incubator, we did podcast episodes on each of the members of that incubator. So if you want to actually get a little more texture and a little more experience and a little more direct testimony from more teams, the place to do that is with the Vitalist Spark podcast. You can find it at vitalisthealth.org/podcast, or you can find it on iTunes and Spotify and all that stuff. So check those out if you have a chance. Again, applications due October 16th. Again, Q&A Zoom call on October 1. And with that, turn it back to Serena.
Thanks, John. Just a few more questions popped up while you were sharing all of that great info. People wanted to know if we'll be sharing these links outside of the chat box. And yes, absolutely. In the follow-up email to everyone who registered for this webinar, not only will you get the link to the recording, you will also get links to all of the information that I shared in the chat box. So if you're interested in listening to the podcast interviews, and I agree with Eric, I'm just going to give a shout out to the Vitalist Spark podcast in general. You should subscribe if you're not already, but in case you're not, we'll send out links to the Spark podcast interviews with incubator participants. We will also send out links to descriptions of other teams that have joined the first 2 cohorts of the incubator. And if nothing else, it's just really exciting to see all of the great work that's happening across Arizona. And I think we might have had one other question come up. If you attended this webinar, will you be on an email list for future calls? The answer is yes. I will make sure, well, I'll make sure that you get the information for the October 1st Zoom Q&A. So if you are interested in joining that, you will definitely get that. And yes, probably we will make sure that you get added to our email list so you get more information about the incubator as well. Okay.
Well, I'll just say one last thing. The only way this incubator project works is with you guys. It really takes, and we've been very fortunate so far, it really takes a great group of people who are passionate about what they're doing, who recognize that their day job is broader than it should be, and that we've got a lot of work to do to help our communities improve their health and to help them thrive. And so we're really excited to go on that journey with you. And we're really, really, really grateful that you were here today to talk more about it. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Cynthia. Serena, your leadership on this work has been tremendous. Thank you. And I think with that, we'll probably wrap it up. Serena, anything from you?
I don't think so. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for your great questions. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be here and ask such thoughtful questions. And we look forward to hearing more from you and learning more about the work that you're doing in your communities. And with that, we will end. Have a great day, everyone.